tonight for our oxtails and cocktails for May. We are really excited to be joined here today, always by our executive director, Shannon Stratton, who is in conversation with different artists and community members and Oxbow staff monthly to talk about their practice, to talk about their connection to Oxbow, and all kinds of great things. So you are definitely in for a treat. So tonight we will be joined in conversation by our head designer and marketing manager, Ashley Freeby. Ashley Freeby is an artist as well, and she does some really, really great work. Through the use of natural materials, poetic language, and minimalism, Freeby explores sight, monuments, and data as a way to investigate the essence of memory across our land as a way to create legacy. Her recent solo and dual exhibitions include Unsterile Soil with Gallery 102, Plots and Hems at Hyde Park Art Center, As Gesture at Chicago Artists Coalition, Non-Constants at the Annex at Sputnik Press, and Unjustified Patterns at Kanzli, Berlin. In addition, she has participated in group exhibitions in DC, Miami, Chicago, Toronto, Canada, and Pennsylvania. She was a Halcyon Arts Lab Fellow, a HATS Project Residence, and has attended Vermont Studio Center and the Institute für Eis Modgliche in Berlin, Germany. Freeby was awarded the Spark Grant from Chicago Artists Coalition as well, earning her MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and a BA from Bucknell University. Freeby currently works for Oxbow School of Art and Artist Residency as communications manager and head designer. So we're really excited to talk about Oxbow publications, branding, and graphics, and touch a little bit on how that is incorporated into Ashley Freeby's work as well with her job at Oxbow. My name is Sierra McKissick, and I'm the communications associate, do public programs as well, and social media. So make sure you're following us on socials as well. And with that, I will hand it over to Shannon and Ashley. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sierra.
Sierra.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks
Here.
for doing an oxtails and cocktails.
Yeah, no problem.
Tell us about your favorite gin and tonic that you selected tonight.
My favorite gin and tonic is based off of this spicy gin that I was introduced to a few years ago. I discovered it at the Philadelphia Flower Show, and it's a local Pennsylvania distillery that makes it. It's from the Revivalist. It's this spicy jalapeno flavored gin. I would use it in all gin and tonics, but I also really love it with grapefruit juice because I'm a big grapefruit juice or grapefruit person in general.
Do you put something spicy on the rim of your glass?
Not usually. That's just like too much work for me.
Just put the gin and the grapefruit juice.
Yeah, just put it together, done.
Done. Yeah, no muddling.
No, none of that.
I appreciate that. I think I have big dreams for making fancier cocktails and ultimately just kind of do this as well. I didn't have spicy gin, so I made a more botanical gin and tonic, but I did feel inspired as I do like gin and tonics as well, but sadly mine is not spicy.
That's okay.
So I'm glad that you were open to talking tonight. I think when I pitched us having a conversation a couple months ago, I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about kind of your like special project, the Crow's Nest, but that kind of since then, we also like to nerd out and joke about and talk about all of the different brands and logos that Oxbow's gone through. And when we get a chance, look at the old catalogs and the archives. So also seemed like a really fun thing to do tonight, to just nerd out and look at some of that stuff and talk about Oxbow's sort of inconsistent identity over its 111 years. And, hear from a designer herself about, what it means to produce a strong brand for an organization. And also kind of dive into your own interest in publications and artist books and talk about a big project you've been working on for the last couple of years that is both a artistic project, but also a publication project in your mind. So kind of full circle, right?
Right. Yeah.
What do you want to do first?
Um, I mean, I feel like maybe we should talk about logos because that seems,
That's
I
the
think
last.
that's one of my favorite. I mean, when you work at a organization that's 111 years old, there's a lot of branding and catalogs that have been put out and produced, and just I like to think about that and think about the history of design through Oxbow. But there have been a lot of logos over the years. Some consistencies, some inconsistencies. And I think one of the things that we don't know in our history is who was designing those things. That's kind of a lot of history that I don't know, and I don't know
Yeah.
in the archives.
I think probably this is a good point to make this little announcement to everyone who's listening. Um, or just to cover a couple things, many of you know we're 111 years old, but we don't have we have a lot of things in a box, but I hesitate to call that an archive. There hasn't really been a moment where Oxbow has really taken the time to really truly kind of put together a plan for its archive, and kind of add to and manage that accordingly. Our records are a little all over the place, let's just say. So that is something that we've started to take on this year. Molly, who's here tonight too, who's our executive assistant and perhaps jack of all trades, has been pretty excited about the archive. We've written a couple grants to try to get some help to make a little bit more sense of it. But it's sort of an exciting and daunting task. We're a very old arts organization that really hasn't had somebody truly pull together our history and our records. And to your point, Ashley, we don't know who did this work. It's even been very inconsistent that there was ever somebody who was in your role.
Mhm.
Just before we got on this call, you found in some catalog that there had been a marketing director and what did you say?
Residential director. That was the
Resident.
same time. Yeah.
So Oxbow's got a long
I
history of combining, kind of hybridizing jobs in a wacky way. I think for the most part, maybe you're the first person who truly is dedicated to designing communications as a full-time job at Oxbow. So that's a pretty important moment for us, I think, as an organization where we're taking the development of our brand and the way we're communicating to the outside world and also inside our organization more seriously and more consistently.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm glad to be the first. I'm just saying.
Will you, I'm excited to look at these catalogs with you and hear your point of view about like what's working, what's not working. I think we've decided it's okay to just straight out say what, like this one wasn't doing it. Before we do that though, will you tell us about your beautiful Ox Circle that you did for us this year, and you're thinking about that as
Sure.
kind of all-purpose brand?
Here it is. Beautiful art. I want to hold up a lot of things, and so is Shannon, but I'm really into this just because I also look at a computer screen all day.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be interactive and just make you awkwardly stare at things from my screen. So the Ox Circle, this was something that we introduced this year. And main, I'll be honest. Part of the reason was also just because this logo is really hard to work with. Uh,
Oh, your sound just cut out, if you can hear me. Can I see from other people watching, is it my screen that's freezing or other people?
No,
You
actually, it's frozen on my end too. I think
okay?
on her end.
I'm frozen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're frozen.
Well, now Shannon, you're frozen.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I can hear you, but you're frozen on my screen and I'm frozen on your screen.
Am I at Oxbow right now?
Yeah, weirdly, Michael is not frozen. I can see I can see him over here in the corner. Totally movies on the porch. Okay, you're back.
Okay, I'm back.
From you just cut out, I think for me, perhaps for everyone, when you said this logo is hard to work with.
Okay, so the logo is really hard to work with. It gets, when it's small, you can't really read our full name. And so using the same typeface, I've pulled out part of our logo and just have used the word ox. I feel like we use ox a lot when we talk about Oxbow. And so it seemed like a very natural move to just pull this out. Shannon also really likes it because it also is XO.
Yeah.
And the reason I put it in a circle was I was really thinking about the inclusiveness of Oxbow and how there's a lot of full circles that happen, like students become faculty members. I was a teaching assistant before I was designer. And so this happens a lot within Oxbow. And I think that's one of the most amazing things that happens at an organization with, this long of a history. And just how long, some of our faculty have been coming back to teach. We've seen a lot of people just come back every summer for years. And I think that is a dedication to a place that only really runs summer classes, and the type of learning that takes place here.
Yeah. I love that thinking about it. I think it at some other point too, maybe you had also talked about it, or maybe I'm just imagining this. Let's go with it. That there's something that the circle also has a sort of sense of maybe like resonates with the sense of community that Oxbow embraces in general. This idea of kind of being within or held within the circle. Am I making that up?
I don't know. No, probably not. I also think about like meals and how we sit around and we all
Yeah,
eat
I think
together.
that to me too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I really I feel like I see when I look at it is this sort of that sort of within the circle, is this love, and that's why I'm so into the OXXO thing about it. Is it I think a lot of folks who work here and come here repeatedly as students and faculty and have these long relationships with Oxford, they might not even be doing those things anymore, but they really love this place, even if they're gone.
Yes.
That feels collected in that circle, that affection that people have for Oxbow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Maybe people will get it tattooed on themselves. You can just tattoo XO on your body and it's automatically an ox tattoo. So
We could get temporary tattoos to sell in the Ox shop.
yes. What do I see? What do I see over here on the staff that are watching? Do I see any nods? Yeah, thumbs up from Michael. So that feels like a very well thought out brand. And I remember when we posted it and I reposted it, a couple of people one person who's a design historian, another person who's a pretty well known graphic designer in Chicago who does a lot of design work for museums, both responded to the Ox Circle with like, this is so great. Like, this is a fantastic design. And so it's interesting to see like your colleagues in the field can really recognize immediately what makes for a sharp.
Hey Ben, look.
I'm not sure who got in there, but that people can identify a sharp logo and smart brand thinking when it's just as simple as just the first two consonants in our name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So can we talk about what went wrong and what went right in the past? Then this is the Oxbow critique session with Ashley. I'm gonna we can't find, or at this point in the archive that I've got with me, I've got some older materials at Oxbow. Ashley's got some newer materials in Pennsylvania, in Allentown. So we're gonna go back and forth with the show and tell. This is from 1941. This is an Oxbow with Oxbow on top of it. This seems to be potentially one of our earliest, if not our earliest logo.
I think just thinking about the time period there, then I think it works because there's not a lot, it's not placed over images a lot. That was another hard thing with this logo, was whenever I wanted to put it over an image, it was like impossible unless it was like a blue sky or something. Like anytime we had to put it over trees, which is our main, you know, that's our landscape. It was impossible. I had to put a box around it.
Right.
So that was also why, you know, the circle came into. But you know, that's that logo's from like what, 1940?
1940, and it was used into the 50s in these very tiny catalogs, which I will also point out are Ashley's favorite. Look at
They
these.
are my favorite. They're so tiny.
So tiny.
We could never put all our information in that now.
No. Back page, it says everybody's going. In scare quotes, I don't really know what that means. Everybody's going. Oxbow. Everyone's going.
I love these little illustrations in these catalogs. I think that's kind of why I'm super drawn to them.
Yeah, there's some really, well, there's that one little, oh yeah, this is a nice one to all you kitchen folks on the call. It's this nice little mid-century modern graphic here inside.
A very pointy knife.
Very pointy knife. So yeah, so that one works in because as far as you can tell, it's not used over pictures. It's what do you think about this, you know, relating Oxbow School of Painting to you know, some bridalry?
I mean, there was probably horses. Like that's probably how people got to campus. I don't.
It maybe is a bit nostalgic.
Yeah.
Still here in the 40s. Okay, or sorry, still here in 57. We're a little low on, also just for those of you who are curious, here's another very tiny catalog. This is kind of lovely because they put the burials on the cover, which is, I think quite a few of these have been lost or not as visible as they used to be.
Yeah. Those are all the ones down by the fire pit, right? Yeah.
I think we're missing a lot of stuff from the 60s right now. So
we really are. Yeah. And then we jump to, I have 73, which is this.
Yes.
It feels like Halloween-y.
Michael says not good.
Or
Yeah.
like puffy clouds or something.
Or like it was torn out of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also seems like it would be, I mean, as noted just right here, like not great to work with on top of anything else.
No.
Heavy-handed, you might say.
True.
Yes, like, I mean, what do you think? What the logic was there? We're talking, let's make an Oxbow that looks like it's made out of clay, that it's written in the sand, that it's, again, well, we're not quite making a brand that suits the actual.
At this point, we were still summer school of painting.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a painting.
Yeah.
I don't know, but this logo
also thinks they're going for fire.
Maybe that's it. This logo has had, I think, some iterations though, in the 70s. Because, yeah, there's that, which is kind of similar, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
The X is bigger, the W is chunkier, and the B is, yeah.
Also, it's just really like, it's everything.
It's everything.
Everything that this poster has got going for down a little bit.
It's almost like they had this idea of a logo and every year someone else carved it.
Like it was like the annual t-shirt. It was just a, why don't you write off
annual logo.
Annual logo. How do you feel about that, Ashley? Do you want to start an annual logo?
No. I
do not fit your logo ideas to Ashley. Do not do it.
No, I finally got a logo that I can work with. I don't want to change it. And then there's this one, which is a little bit cleaner. Looks a little bit more like a standard typeface. But still kind of has that like bubbly,
like handwriting kind of style,
brush strokey style.
I would agree that it does seem like the 70s pretty much was a make your own logo every year kind of era.
Yeah.
Until this happened.
Where'd that come from? Because that, I mean, we could bring that back. I'd be okay with that. We can't see it, Shannon.
Oh, sorry. It was
you gotta go up higher. There
sorry.
you go. There you go.
Yeah, so we've got, this is 78, which feels very 78. It feels like it's in the era of the World Expo. It does have an activewear vibe, Annie, I agree. I kind of love it. It's impossible to read, like all logos from the late 70s.
Yeah.
It's not impossible to read, but there is something pretty amazing going on with this W right here.
That W is beautiful.
I would just say this was on trend at the moment, right? I mean, this has literally nothing to do with Oxbow as an organization. This is more of a kind of late 70s typeface trend that's being adopted.
Yeah. The green though, that's like the first time I think we've seen the Oxbow green in historical stuff.
Yeah, and this is actually pretty much the same green, isn't it?
Pretty close.
Yeah. What do you, I mean, it's a long time though before we get from this to the Cooper that we use now, but there does seem to feel like, there was a little bit, this is a little bit of a precursor in a way when you think about, the strength, I guess, of the ox. Well, we'll bring this back for our activewear line.
Oxbow track pants.
Yeah, Oxbow track pants coming to the Ox shop soon. So when we hit the 80s, things get really.
Oh, this is so 70s.
Oh, there's a naked Ramona running by.
So this is 84. We have a mixture of type styles, serif and sans serif.
Can you tell us what's good or bad about that idea?
Well, I mean, it's not good or bad. What's the shift in size is what would be more problematic, I believe, because this will get smaller before the ox gets smaller. Yeah. And this underline will either get really thin or stay really heavy when it shrinks down.
And appear to merge with the bow, I would imagine, right?
The bow.
Like it would look like it was merging with the bow. It does make the OX stand out.
It does.
Yeah, so at this point, it seems like things are really getting, the character is starting to go away.
It's very random. And then
Yeah,
we have
still
this.
random in the 80s.
Oh, this is jumping to the 90s. This is 92.
I mean, that one's just ridiculous. I don't understand that one at all. I can't wrap my head around the decision that that person must have been making. But we're also starting to see now, we've got actually, I guess, late 80s and into the 90s, we are seeing our partner show up on our branding. And so we don't put that as prominently in our print materials as they were doing in the 90s, because it's featured right there on the cover of the one you were just holding up.
Yeah, Rose Art Institute.
Yeah, whose branding has also changed.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think in a few of the, I think early 2000s catalog, there are a few designers listed, and it makes me wonder if maybe at some point SAC was designing catalogs for us, because it does seem like a weird shift, unless it was also like a design firm. I don't know. But it's very like sporadic. It's not every catalog in the 2000s.
So how long have we been in the Cooper era?
Only since 2018. So from about 2005, we had this logo. Again, kind of like brush strokey.
On the O.
Oh, yeah. So this was around from 2005 till 2018. And 2018 is when we came to Cooper Black.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of, I guess I would interpret that as it feels like a very camp t-shirt kind of font, like the iron-on letters maybe that you have on your t-shirt or on your bag or whatever at camp.
Yeah. It feels very campy.
Feels very campy. In a kitschy way.
I don't know.
Well, I want to talk to you about the things that you've been kind of changing now. So I feel like our brand is kind of getting under control a little bit. And you've been making some decisions. You've been with us for a little over 2 years.
No, actually just 2 years this month.
So yeah. It's been brief and hectic, you might say.
I did say that.
The circumstances, but you've been doing some really interesting things, I think, to maybe clean up our brand, make our messaging a little bit more specific, or really, I think maybe a little bit more mindful. And there's lots of things to talk about, introducing specific colors and gradients, and so maybe you'll walk us through that, about how you've been thinking about the Oxbow brand since you've kind of taken over its management.
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen, show you, kind of walk you through some of the catalogs and other printed materials I've been working on. I'll just note that I haven't, can you all see the winter catalog? Yeah, okay. I haven't changed anything else in our design, in our brand. I haven't changed our fonts. The only thing that we have now is this ox circle logo. I haven't changed, we still use the green and the black and white. Those are kind of our colors. And then every once in a while, I, splash in another color here and there. And so what I have been really just focusing on is making clean design. That's something that is really important to me. And just like having white space, making type that's really easy to read and digest, because we need to put a lot of copy in our catalogs because of course descriptions and bios and things like that. So this was the first catalog that I did at Oxbow, winter 20. Mm-hmm. It's winter catalog's pretty short, only because we run like 3 classes generally until COVID happened. And so one of the other things that I kind of noticed when I first started and was looking through catalogs is a lot of the faculty members' work was really small. And so that's something I've been trying to be more conscious of, is making those images bigger and giving them more presence in the catalog. Because I think it's, this becomes a catalog for them, our faculty, as much as it does for us to promote our classes. So this is summer 2020. I was very excited because this was my first summer catalog, and then COVID happened. And so this quickly became unusable because we had to cancel classes. And so we went through a few iterations of this catalog. This was part of the final printed one. But eventually it came down to just a few classes on a PDF sheet because of COVID. And so,
the faculty work looks fantastic. The faculty work, I mean, just looks fantastic.
Yeah, I am trying really, working with artists and getting images is always a task. But when we do get properly sized images, it really gives me the opportunity to like make them large. And so I think for this catalog, we went up in page count so that I could do this, but I went down in overall size, like width by height, because the catalog before that was pretty large. Another thing that we do here at Oxbow is we love quotes, we love stories. And so we often reach out to faculty members to send us quotes about their experience at Oxbow, to include those in the catalogs. I want to break for a minute and talk about invitation design. So every year we have a summer benefit. In 2020, it was a fall benefit. But so this was my first summer benefit invitation. And we, Shannon decided to give it this overarching name of field of vision. And then we would kind of always have this like subtitle. So Forging a Future was last year. We have a new theme for this year.
Watering our roots.
Okay. I didn't know if you wanted me to tell anyone.
I will just say though that what's phenomenal about this invitation, I saw Lynn say in the chat box that it's really bold and powerful, and I think I was really excited about this. And when we worked on it, we talked about how in the past the invitations really had this kind of garden party maybe feel to it, and they looked relatively similar from year to year.
Yeah.
In recent history, I mean, we can't speak to everything, but this was such an exciting invitation, and people really responded to it, and I heard a lot of compliments on the design of it, because it really just is I don't know, it just seems like it announces a completely different kind of evening, or a completely different kind of event than those more sort of garden oriented, kind of more floral invites had in the past. Having said that, we have Watering Our Roots this year, so
yeah, it's like very garden party.
Yeah, but it's different. It's different.
For this invitation, it folded It opened kind of in the middle of it. So that's why Field of Vision is on the outside. And then this Celebrating the Past was what you first saw when you opened up the invitation. I'm really interested in the way that invitations fold and how you experience them when you open them and pull them out of the envelope. This year's also has an interesting folding technique. So yeah, I love invitation. And then Shannon and I get to nerd out over paper, which is also very exciting.
Envelope choice. Big conversation every year.
Yeah, it is. This was the winter 2021 catalog. So this was winter that just happened. Every catalog cover is work by a faculty member that is teaching during that session or season. And so this was by Snow. I'm not going to try to pronounce Snow's last name, but she taught a 3D animation class. Yes, I see Rebecca's head nodding. And so this was a digital catalog because we were still in COVID times. And so we did do a small edition where we printed really just enough for faculty, staff, and the archive. But this was something that we sent to our students and faculty members digitally. Got some quotes again. And it was a little interactive. That was something that I am familiar with because before I came to Oxbow, I worked at a magazine many years ago. And I was working there right when like iPads and digital versions, digital publications became a thing. And so that was part of my job when I worked there, was to learn how to design and recreate the printed publication into something digital that could be experienced on an iPad. This is this summer's course catalog, which is also a digital version. And this catalog has like 4 versions of it, just because of the way that we're running summer for COVID reasons. So we broke it up into a PDF that was for SAIC students, Michigan or partner school students, non-credit, and then we also have online classes. So that was the 4th edition of this.
I think one of the things that's worth noting about this catalog is how much you are doing information design in this because of the like picking apart these different paths that people could be on, and I assume it's going to come up in a second, but that like chart for the 3-week students about how to choose their classes. So there's this kind of extra element of design in this catalog that I think maybe people don't always think about all the time, is that sort of that line of thought is not just designing the thing graphically, but designing something so that designing the information and the flow of it in a way that is digestible and understandable. And you had kind of a tough project here.
Yeah, it was difficult. Infographics, though, are my favorite thing to design. So things like this course offering chart, I really love them, and being able to like think through that process of creating them. But it was difficult. Just figuring out the way that it was going to work so students had a chance to be less confused, maybe. So this is also another flowchart that we did this year because we introduced this 3-week intensive. And so this was just a way, to get students to, try to understand what this 3-week intensive was. I'm going to go back here because this is, there's a lot of gradients that have shown up. They were also in the winter catalog here. It's interesting because I used to not like to use gradients in my design. And I think it might have been, I don't know why, but I think there's a chance, I'm really inspired, I think, by the sunsets at Oxbow, and that's where this comes from. These gradients come from inspiration from the sunsets on the lagoon. But I also think it's just, we're in art school, and I think that we can use bold, bright colors. And, I think I take advantage of that in using these gradients. This was our Art on the Meadow catalog for 2020. But I wanted to really just talk about this one to lead into the new Experience Oxbow catalog. So we have taken this Art on the Meadow catalog, which are, workshops for individuals who pretty much live close to campus, to come and take a day or 2-day workshop. This also was edited because of COVID, so we had to cancel some of the classes. So there was also a few iterations of this catalog as well. But this year we took this catalog and this information and put it into the Experience Oxbow catalog. And this is a really, this was an exciting project for me because it gave me a chance to reimagine the catalog and kind of build it into something new and exciting, and that could be used as a promotional piece for our community, or very Western Michigan community, excuse me. And so this has all of our Meadow classes in it, workshops in it. It has cabin rental information. But then something that I really wanted to do in here was introduce interviews with some of our community members. So whether that be, chefs that we work with. This is Chris Ferris, who owns the Farmhouse Deli in Saugatuck. We have an interview with James Brandis, who's a longtime faculty member and friend of Oxbow, and then Mary Jo, who's just also been a supporter of Oxbow for a really long time and a really an arts advocate kind of in our local community. So it brings in these discussions and interviews and shows a little bit of the history. James has been teaching with us forever, really. He first, I think, he first came to Oxbow as a a summer job when he was in school at SAIC. And so it's just another way for us to show the lineage of the people and our friends who, come to Oxbow time after time.
Yeah, I have to say that in general, the kind of kudos that I get from folks in the area after this catalog came out, I mean, people just loved it. They just loved it. They just, I think they felt like it was a really readable magazine or something, but it was received really, really well. So I mean, that's exciting when you put out something that is a tool to get people to enroll in classes, but folks spend time with it and want to keep it and look at it and and take the time to take the time to pass along their enthusiasm.
Yeah. And my background is in publication design, and so this is where, this is the part of my job that is my love and my passion. And then kind of feeding into that idea of doing interviews with community members or folks who have come to Oxbow or spent a really long time with Oxbow. We have this thing called the Crow's Nest. which when I started, Rebecca Parker was like, hey, you're going to want to know about this thing called the Crow's Nest. I think you're going to like it. And she was right. She was right. So Rebecca is our program director, and her and Danny Giles, our former academic director, put together this Crow's Nest. This is the first one. It was used as a marketing tool for the fellowship and residency program. And then I think this one was really well received, and they decided to grow it into something else. And so they had started to gather interviews with faculty members, fellows, residents, and started to compile these stories, these Q&As that we could put into this publication. When I started, it was the 2018, is that right? 2018 summer, Rebecca, 19. So I have really just like grabbed onto this thing and started to design it and create it into something that's larger and that we can produce, maybe yearly, ideally 2 years, just because I've got a lot of things to do. But I really, really love this project. And so this is a class that has occurred at Oxbow for a couple of years now with the Belknaps. It's an interview with them. It also has some like student voices popping up. So there's a range of Q&As with, this is Rosemary, she was a fellow in 2018. Another class highlight, this is from 2019, Anandata, which was a class with Gina Valentine, who started to like scan and digitize some of our historical documents. Donor profile with Jimmy Wright, who has been a longtime donor for Oxbow. Cookbook, this really was a nice project for me personally, because I started to learn a little bit about our kitchen history. I talked to Eric May, I talked to Chapla, and I talked to Mikey, and it was just a really great project. I think what I love about Crow's Nest is it's putting together our history that we might not have documented before. And this is really starting to like create an archive for us that hasn't existed as far as I'm aware. And it's something, that we can print and give to people or sell. And it's just another tool to begin to, share why people love Oxbow so much.
When will
July.
July 2021.
It needs to get finished.
Close. It's very close.
It's so close.
But I think at this point, we're, like you said, it's like we're looking at it as a biannual publication.
Yeah.
And maybe pertinent to say some of the editorial thoughts for the next one that have been tossed around, because I think they're pretty interesting.
Yeah. 2020 was a weird year for everyone, but it was also a very strange year for Oxbow. Not to have in-person classes for a whole summer, and to have to switch to online classes. That was the first time we've ever ran online classes. And so thinking about maybe like change and new futures, but also care. I think is an important topic that's going to come up in the 2020 issue. I'd love to talk to staff members. We had a few staff members who like stayed on campus over winter. I'm sure that was, I'm sure there's things to talk about there. But, I bet that was like that was a long time to be at the place where you work and live and not be, not have students on campus. So yeah, I'm excited to think about the next issue. Planning for that is something that I really enjoy. And it's just another, it's another chance to dig up stories and share them and work with people who I think as a designer, especially in this kind of organization where we don't necessarily have like, we don't have our we don't have our Chicago office anymore. And so I think as a designer, I'm very isolated in a lot of ways. And so this gives me a chance to kind of work with our larger community, which I've really also enjoyed.
Maybe that's a good time to kind of pivot to, for you bring up in throughout this presentation, your background, both working in a magazine and your own interest in artist book and publication design. We tend to divide, for those of you who come to Oxtails and Cocktails before, we sort of divide the conversation up between the Oxtails part and whoever is here chatting with me about their individual practice. And so we can pivot to that part of our evening. You have both a background in design, but like publication design, layout as a designer, also of like fundamentally an interest in artist books, I think, as a platform, not just as a design platform, but as a kind of studio art platform.
Mm-hmm.
When did those things merge for you? Were they there before working in design, or did they emerge out of that? Or can you tease out sort of where the publication became a practice, I guess?
That's a good question. So my art practice actually started in photography. And then I had a sculpture class, and that was the end of that. I fell in love with making, clean 3-dimensional objects. And so my practice is mainly sculpture based. But the use of text and the narrative started to really creep into my work first in like titles. And I'm really into kind of like the long subtitle that's a narrative that gives you kind of a personal story. I bring in personal narratives into my work. So it started there. And then when I went to grad school, I was like, I am going to learn how to make books. Seemed like a reasonable thing. But I also think it was partly because I was missing being a designer, because at that point, while I was in school, I was just doing like random design jobs or getting like grad assistant jobs where I could design anything at that point. So making books brought that back into my practice. But also I think part of that was to share my writing. I don't consider myself a writer, but it does like creep into a lot of my work. And so I have made quite a few artist books. Generally, they're related more towards the like family. I have a like two focuses really in my practice. One's like more personal about my family and my upbringing, and trying to connect my two families. And so I use a lot of like traditions that were like craft traditions, like quilt making, in that form, but then the writing is very personal there. And then on the other side is more of this making work about injustices against Black bodies and trauma. And most of my work for the last few years has been focused on police brutality and police involved shootings. And so the books don't necessarily come into that realm very often. But I think what did happen in 2020 was I had an opportunity to have a solo show at Gallery 102 in DC. And it was quickly canceled. But the gallery director was like, what do you want to do? Do you want to do an online exhibition? And if you do that, like what do you want to, how do you want it to go about? So I created what I call an installation of content. And so it's a website dedicated to the entire exhibition. And so I collaborated with writers. Each writer wrote something that was related to a body of work that I had already produced. And then there was 6 weeks of the exhibition ran for 6 weeks. So every week a new horizon was released, and the horizons were based off of soil profiles because my work recently has been using soil. So I'm going to pull that up. Excuse me again.
And the horizons were distributed by email. People were alerted to them, I suppose I should say.
Yeah, so I sent out a blast and kind of before the exhibition started, saying that people could sign up to receive, notification that a new horizon was being released. And so this was an interesting project for me because it didn't necessarily feel like I was an artist in this role, because the physical work was already made and was, just shown through photographs. But what I kind of felt more like a curator or a designer at this point, because I was designing the website every week. And so this is an example of a body of work that I've been working on called the Segment Series. Each of these little earth bricks or soil profiles is dedicated to someone who was shot and killed by a police officer. And they grow. This is kind of it in its first early stages, and then they grow. There's grass seed in them, so they grow and then deteriorate over time.
What I maybe think is fascinating is that you've put all of the aspects of your practice into this work. Like, you did make sculpture, you photographed it. The way it's photographed is very much the work as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you've designed this publication, and you are an editor of a publication. Like, you are this sort of publication designer, editor of the other content. I mean, it just feels like you've pulled on everything, the interest in publications, the sculpture, the photography, all of it into this one project in I'd say pretty successful way. You've stitched all of that together. I do love the idea of an installation of content, but I don't know if I feel like just a designer in creating this installation. It sort of got that, total work of art kind of effect, I think, given your ability ultimately to manage all aspects of what it is cumulatively.
Mm-hmm. I think I also, really, I was designer, but I also was marketer. You know, I had to market this thing. I had to, you know, I needed people to show up to it and see it every week. And that was kind of the hardest part for me, on top of, you know, this also was just a really hard time in general. This launched right after George Floyd was murdered. And so there was tension that was happening. It wasn't, you know, I didn't release this because that happened. It just was coincidental. But, you know, I think in some cases, I'll just go here. Nicole Ivey, she's a professor at GW. I didn't know her before this project, but she wrote this kind of beautiful piece, and it was very hard for her. She, you know, she's a Black woman or Black person, and so you know, I really appreciated the fact that she like took the time to really write this meaningful piece and really poignant piece. But it was a difficult time for all of us, and especially those who, you know, were contributors who were people of color. But I appreciate the time that they took to like contribute to this project, because it turned out better than I ever imagined. Um, but it's also kind of something that I haven't been able to like sit with yet.
Yeah. I was going to ask if in some sense, like, it makes it feel more collaborative.
I would say in a way, yes. In some cases, I talked to the writers about whatever work was going to be in, whatever was going to be work of mine that was going to be in that horizon. So this is a project called Many Thousands Gone, where I've like photoshopped out the crime scene, from news like photos I pulled from news articles. And so in this instance, I had never had a conversation with Nicole about my work. They just went on and, you know, wrote something. But in other cases, I did talk to the writer. So in that way, it felt collaborative, but in some ways it didn't.
Right.
And then in other ways, I've like more directly collaborated. So this Horizon is written by Jesse Meredith, who is my collaborator. We've collaborated on work before. And so in this Horizon, he wrote, but we both took photographs of playgrounds, which was also very, very strange to take photos of empty playgrounds during COVID.
Yeah.
So there was some more like very direct collaborations.
I mean, coming out of, I really, you know, you said straight out that you haven't truly digested the work. I mean, for many reasons. I mean, content, timeline, intensity of the work, the kind of big picture feeling of assembling something like this. Do you feel like it taught you something about your own practice that you didn't know before? I guess in the sense that you sort of you really solved you worked within a constraint that you weren't expecting, and that constraint got even harder and harder in many ways as you tried to produce this installation. And constraints can be really traumatic, and they can also maybe lead to like openings that you had absolutely could not have planned for, had no expectation for.
I think one of the things that I learned the most, you know, there's this like long lineage of this like designer versus artist. And you know, I feel that too. I've never like really meshed those two together. I think of my design, like my design work as my design work, and my art practice as my art practice. In my mind, those have never really crossed until this moment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
doesn't look like there's any verses going on here.
there's not. It
Together.
was a real meshing. And I think, you know, it was also interesting because in like this was kind of coming off of grad school. It was like maybe a year, I guess it was a year after grad school, but there's still that like unlearning process of like in grad school where it was like, you know, you're an artist, you're not a designer, don't make pretty things, blah 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 blah. And so I was like still coming off of that, and this was a real moment where I could be like, no, actually I want to make pretty things. And unknowingly, the way that I approach my practice is the way that I work as a designer. That's, you know, I was a designer before I was an artist. And so that is like how I approach everything.
Well, and I think sometimes there is a constant there's a lot of devaluation of design. I mean, we talk about this a fair amount, just like casually, like
Mhm.
people think of design as this low hanging fruit, like anybody can do it. Like, oh, I'll just throw that in InDesign and I'll fix that, or like I got something to say about the logo. I mean, there's a real unfortunate, I think, lack of real kind of sophisticated appreciation maybe of design, but design can be very critical. I mean, design is critical, and that so that sort of thing, I mean, maybe that one gets in grad school where it's just like, oh, you're not a designer, you're an artist, is pretty problematic, because I think design on a day-to-day basis requires a lot of critical thinking. So to be a smart designer as well as an artist feels to me like a superpower, as opposed to having to like put that other identity away. You know, that feeling that one has to hide that other identity because it's less desirable, let's say, than the studio practice as the kind of like mythical,
Yeah.
the sort of mythical thing that everyone should aspire to.
Yeah, I think I think that's also why I tend to still make very personal work,
Mm-hmm.
because that's maybe the moment that I feel more like an artist. Because a lot of the other work that I do is based off of research. Like
Right.
all of those projects centered around police shootings, you know, take a lot of time and energy to like look up those names, archive those names. And so that, in a sense, to me, still feels like I'm using my design sense.
Right. Yeah. It's
Um,
critical. It's that sort of critical infographic design brain that's taking like really important information and figuring out how to translate that, even like whether it's graphically or poetically or what have you, you're translating
mhm.
this really critical information.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great conversation. I'm glad we're having this because I've never thought of this since grad school.
Awesome. We can always have this conversation, actually. 8:20 our time, so I'm gonna open it up for folks who are still here to ask you questions about you, your practice, your philosophies on design, on art, on the work they've just seen, all of it. Um, I think you can unmute yourself and just ask the question. You don't have to stick it in the chat box. Is that like post-talk nervousness? Should I ask?
Hi, can I just go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Ashley. It was lovely to see you guys talk about, and it was lovely to see the history of Oxbow logos, and yeah, it's just amazing. So I just have a question. The way that we are, due to this last year, I mean, we are in general struggling with print in design in general, right? Um, so how do you see, or where do you see the future of sort of the publication design, or I mean, I know that I mean there are different binderies in the UK or in the US which are very much active, and they're doing letterpress, and they're doing, you know, amazing sorts of risographs and all of that. But but if we talk about clients, if we talk about on a larger scale, where do you see this thing going, or do you think it would affect? I mean, do you see that it would affect that in a positive way, or I mean, it's like more like a
Mhm. Well, should I wait a minute before I answer?
I just sent a direct message that said that she just froze. Maybe wait just a second in case she can't hear you.
Okay.
We'll see if that channel gets up, and
Oh,
I think the internet is not on our side. Oh no, we're back. Okay.
we're back. Okay.
Aisha, you just cut off a little bit at the end of your question.
Okay.
Froze.
Okay. I mean, I just wanted to know if what is your take in terms of post-COVID, because Oxbow is a place for people, right? And that thing has shifted. So do you see it as an opportunity in terms of, you know, reaching out to people who have been to Oxbow years ago, but hello?
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, you're stuck, so I didn't know. So I mean, post-COVID publication plus design, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think print design for a long time has, you know, slowly fallen to the wayside because we do, everything is so digital and we live in a digital world. But I think there's value in printed material. It's a tactile experience that you don't get necessarily with, you know, looking at something on your phone or your laptop. And so I personally believe that print will still exist. But I do think that, you know, we're in this place where it has to exist in both places. And if it doesn't, then maybe the thing that is printed isn't as informational based. So like our course catalog, I don't think we could ever do just like one or the other at this point. I think it's a place, we're at a place where we need a digital catalog and a printed catalog, because there's still people who ask us to, you know, receive our course catalog. And I think it's a great way to look at what we're offering. So I think there's always going to be a mix of both. And I know Shannon loves print as much as I do, so it's not going to go anywhere from Oxbow.
Love print.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. It's a first, hi, thanks for sharing. It's more about the logo part of your talk, but I was curious about like the name change from like School of Painting to School of Art and Artist's Residency. Like it's a longer name, but it's a different name, and I'm wondering how, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, if you know, like, what the process is like to like have to change a name, or yeah.
Well, I mean, Shannon, do you want to take part of this? Because I think there's probably more information than I know about like nonprofit situations.
Turns out, everybody, that our name is registered simply as Oxbow. We are not actually registered as a business. with any longer a name than that. So the and artist residency was appended to our name by Elizabeth Chodos when she was the director. And the residency program the organization kind of further developed the residency program, but it's not an official name change. It's not trademarked. It's not registered on our business license, on our audit. We're just Oxbow. So it's a good question, because it's actually something that when the board just went through and made some amendments, updated and amended the bylaws, that they started talking about us just making sure that we registered our full name, which I think at this point is actually still a conversation that we'll lean into when we go through a strategic planning phase, as to whether or not to officially make it Oxbow School of Art and Artist Residency, or to return back to the more simple Oxbow School of Art title. Sidebar note, there's another Oxbow school in California that does make things a little confusing, and they are much, much younger than we are. And they went ahead with that name anyways, after having had some contact with Oxbow here in Michigan. So, but yeah, so to sort of your question, Michael, our name's actually just Oxbow officially, and we would have to, it's a pretty simple thing, but we would have to make changes to kind of our official legal documents to get it registered as the full name either which way. So I think along with the weird Oxbow logo that's kept changing, I think the name has changed rather has been changed rather casually by folks who have at different points in its history been run in Oxbow.
Cool, thanks.
Do you guys have some sort of a poster for all the Oxbow logos in one thing?
We do not, but we should.
Yeah.
that would be very cool. Yeah.
Thank you for that stellar suggestion.
We can make a book probably, because there's a lot of them.
Any and all, you know, logo gear requests, you know, please throw them in the chat box. We'll consider them in future communications meetings.
I have a question.
Molly.
Hi, Ashley. Yeah, COVID this year at Oxbow. Crazy year in a lot of ways. Yeah, I'm curious if you have any ideas about what's next in terms of your personal studio practice, or projects that are sort of bubbling or that you are excited about, or not. I think it's okay to like not have those things too.
Yeah, so after Unsterile Soil, I took a break. I, you know, really just quite honestly stepped away from my practice. I haven't done any research. I haven't really been thinking about my studio practice. And it's been cleansing and rejuvenating in a lot of ways. You know, I also just I kind of did schooling backwards. So I got a 2-year degree right out of high school, started working at the publishing company when I was 20, and then worked there up until 2013. And so that was when I went back to school to do my undergrad and MFA. So from I was working and going to school from 2011 to 2013. And then from 2013 till 2018, I was in school. And then really after that, I also just didn't take a break. As you know, I worked too much. But it was just nonstop after grad school. I went to Oxbow, I went to Berlin, came back to Chicago, started working, had all kinds of, you know, wonderful opportunities, which was great. But I kind of eventually, after that, on sterile soil, I just hit a wall. And it was one, just like pure exhaustion physically, but also just like mentally and emotional, because that really just like took a lot out of me. So the answer is no. I still am not making work, still not really doing any research. But it's getting to be that time. I think I'm starting to feel like I'm missing something, and it's that like making and thinking, and really like doing research. I love doing research.
Yeah, that time for rest is so important though.
Yeah.
Especially when you don't stop like like you often do.
Hi, Annie Fisher.
You have any questions, Annie?
It's just so good to see you and hear your voice.
You too. Are you done with school?
Sorry, dishwashing happening. I just graduated. I just finished last week.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, still figuring out what's next.
I mean, you could come back to Oxbow and be our archivist.
No. You say when.
Just putting that into the universe.
Well, we're at time. Thank you, Ashley, for this really enjoyable evening conversation over G&Ts. We've come out of this with some good ideas.
Tracksuits.
As Sierra's put in the chat box, you can learn more about Ashley's work at her website, ashleyfreeby.com. We will end up, Sierra will edit and repost this video to our website and YouTube if you want to check it out later or forward it to other people who you think would love to hear Ashley talk about her work, and both her personal work and her work as a designer. And we hope you'll tune in again. We do one of these once a month, and we will have one coming to you in June. Sierra, it is on June
16th.
June 16th.
Really excited. We're going to be talking to our Black in the Woods instructors, Krista Franklin and hopefully Ayana Moore as well too. So join us on June 16th for the next Oxtails and Cocktails, and make sure that you check out all of our previous ones. We do have a YouTube channel called The Oxbow, and you can find all of our previous videos for this program and our Toast Tuesday conversations between our staff members and an artist of their choice as well. But thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing about your practice, and Shannon and you for just going on and on about all of the great logos and Oxbow publications. It's really fascinating to see how we've evolved as an organization. Stay tuned for information about our benefit. We will be able to bring all of that evolution together in one place at Oxbow on campus. So stay tuned in your inboxes for that information coming soon. And thank you so much, and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.